His was the only boat to arrive.
I think maybe it was a cow. I don't know.
There's the thank you letter from Lyndon Johnson.
There was even a monorail at one point to the east of us.
Plus, everybody forgets about pirates.
This is the coolest field trip I have ever been on.
I don't know, but I've been told, keep on dancing, won't ever get old.
Hello, and welcome to the Long Island History Project, the podcast that brings you stories and interviews with people passionate about Long Island history. You can hear them all at longislandhistoryproject.org. My name is Chris Kretz, and I am your host, and our opening music is courtesy of the Homegrown String Band. How many of us read alternate histories? That's a subgenre of science fiction where the author takes a pivotal moment in history, tweaks some of the events, changes what happened, and the result is a totally different world. It can lead to some fascinating and unexpected twists. And when we're talking about World War II, there's been no shortage of alternate histories. You might have read The Moon is Down, The Man in the High Castle, The Plot Against America. But the more you know about the real history, the more you realize truth is stranger than fiction. So today we're going back to the 30s and 40s on Long Island in New York and America, talking about lies, secrets, hidden plots, and some that are not so hidden, as we talk with today's very prolific, very knowledgeable, and very special guest.
My name is Christopher Verga. I'm a local writer and professor in Suffolk Community College in Long Island history, and I also teach at John Jay College of Criminal Justice as well.
Great, and welcome back. I didn't do the math on this, Chris, but you're probably our lead guest if I were to count up all the episodes. So thank you for being a patron of the podcast and continuing to write such great books. Tell us the name of the book we're here to talk about today.
Sure. It's Nazis of Long Island, Sedition, Espionage, and the Plot Against America.
And just to recap, I mean, we talked to you before about you have a book with Carl Grossman on Cold War history, World War II. Robert Moses was more in the 50s and 60s. But would you say you concentrate or you're drawn to mid-20th century American history? Is that sort of your wheelhouse?
Yeah, well, my wheelhouse is anything that surrounds World War II.
Okay.
You know, you can't teach World War II without understanding the effects of World War II. And when we got the Cold War with Carl Grossman, that book, that was pretty much the effects of World War II. My other book, Ferguson Brothers Lynching, Charles Ferguson, he was a World War II vet, and he was on a furlough after signing up again for the service. So, all my characters are based during World War II or post-World War II, even when we discuss Robert Moses as well, post-World War II developments of Long Island. Led to him, consolidating his power even more, and at the same time getting his power questioned. So a lot of my books are circled around World War II some way, somehow.
And that is a pivotal time period for the history of Long Island. So you probably know more than, I would say, almost anyone about the developments that were happening during that stretch. And it's interesting, I have parents that grew up during the 30s and 40s. So a lot of this I absorbed from hearing stories from them. They were children at the time, but they had memories. So what start us off? What do you think were some of the first signs of the trouble or the conflicts that was going to play out on Long Island? And we'll also bring in Brooklyn and Queens because they play a part geographically.
Well, let's talk about why Long Island first. I think that's a good starting point if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, so Long Island is more than a rural appendage of New York City. It's a strategic area. In the 30s, we're starting to have a, Republic Aviation. We got Grumman's Aviation. You have one of the largest military encampments in Lower New York, which is going to be Camp Upton, later Brookhaven Labs, of course. You're also going to have another military encampment called Camp Hero, which is going to come much later after that. And we got a lot of natural deep water ports for boats going in and out, and also shipping channels going to the European theater. A lot of people forget that the first thing people see coming over from Europe when they're immigrating here is not the Statue of Liberty, but the Fire Island Lighthouse. So it just gives you an idea of the strategic location of Long Island. Now, when we talk about Long Island around this time, you also got to look at the facts that Long Island is changing rapidly. Population is growing. I know it sounds ridiculous and compared to now, but Suffolk County was booming. It had a population of 197,000 people. I'm laughing because people thought that was a population boom. Now we got, well, what do we got now, Chris? 1.3 million. So, things were changing really quick here. In addition to that, 1 in 7 people were Klan members, so you did have a base for a lot of indifference. And in addition to that, building on that, we just got out of World War One. No one wanted to go back to another war. Every community on Long Island lost about 2 to 3 people. Every community was touched by World War One. In addition to that, compounding a lot of the anxiety, conspiracies, et cetera, was we were coming out of the Spanish flu pandemic. Coming out of the Spanish flu pandemic, it's kind of similar to COVID. You did have schools that were on lockdown. People did have to wear masks. So we're returning to a form of normalcy. And during this time, we had this rise of crazy conspiracies, especially the book Protocols of the Elder Zion. That became very popular. And it was distributed around a lot of Ford dealerships since Henry Ford promoted that conspiracy theory / hate. And it was being read a lot locally. So we got a perfect breeding ground here. We got 1 to 7 people, Klan members, conspiracy theories being embraced, and a strong will for isolationism. And you got countries like Germany who are going off to a World War II, and they're looking at the strategic location of Long Island. And they're also looking at and taking an assessment of the heavy German population here. So they're looking for vulnerabilities, essentially. And this is pretty much the setting of this whole story.
And I'll just throw this in. I know it's not the focus of your book, but just as prelude, because I know this history myself a little. The World War One, there was also German intrigue. I'm thinking of the Telefunken secret messages being sent from Sable. So they sort of had a first pass at how they might influence the country. German spies in World War One. So it's also they had some experience with having to navigate this terrain during a war.
Yeah, of course. They had a strong idea about it. But you also had a lot of migrant German workers and German businessmen that knew Long Island as well, that were going back and forth. Bresling / Lindenhurst, that had a very strong German enclave. Islip Terrace, originally called Germantown, that was another strong German enclave. Obviously, we had a lot of, even Franklin Square, going as far west as Franklin Square. That was a real strong German enclave as well. And German immigration is different than a lot of other forms of immigration. It's, they go back and forth to Germany versus a lot of Italians on the second wave that didn't want to go back. They just stayed here.
So in terms of, so you would say most of your book takes place or plays out throughout the 1930s into the war years, which parallels and is triggered by the rise of Hitler and Nazism in Germany. What kind of picture can you paint of the American attitude towards as they were watching this power base grow in when Hitler took power and started enacting these restrictive laws against the obvious anti-Semitism? What it's not a monolith, but what was sort of the mood of the country towards what was happening in Germany, would you say?
Well, you had people like Father Coughlin, that was a radio preacher, and he was really promoting anti-Semitism. And he had an audience of over 1 million people. Even in his periodical, Social Justice, which said the Jewish people were like pretty much trying to stop growth of Christianity. So there was a lot of anti-Semitism. And when people saw this stuff in Germany, there was backlash, there was resistance, but it wasn't as strong as we would like to think. In addition to that, I just want to add something here. There was also a lot of German American groups that were opposed to Hitler and that were openly advocating against the rise of Hitler. And they were right here on Long Island and in Brooklyn as well. So I just want to clear the water that it's not all Germans. It's a portion of them, but not all.
Your book is deeply researched. Your cast of characters is vast, and in terms of all the different groups that were maybe collaborating or, following parallel tracks. Just to talk briefly about the research, and did you realize going in sort of how broad the canvas was, how many people and organizations you'd have to describe to unfold the story?
Oh no, 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 definitely not, definitely not. This I didn't realize an eighth of this story. I just thought I was doing a book on Camp Siegfried at first, but it's like pulling a sweater, the thread in the sweater. You got to keep pulling it till there's no sweater, Chris.
Unravel it, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the research I did get was from the FBI vault.com, which is declassified FBI files. Another is from the National Archives, the Dickstein House on Un-American Activities Records, which is a very, 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 very intimidating file if you ever get it in your hands. And also a lot of Governor Dewey papers. The German American Bund and these fascist groups really did keep Governor Dewey up at night. In addition to that, we also used a lot of the LaGuardia papers. So, we had a vast cache of information. And, honestly, I look back at the book and realize I really wish I added a lot more. Of course, you think about this once the book's in print on bookshelf.
But so you mentioned Camp Siegfried, which some people may have heard that name. Maybe that's a good way into the story. That's out in Yaphank.
Yeah.
Describe what that was and how that came about.
Yeah, so Camp Siegfried was a parade ground for the German American Bund, which was a pro-Nazi group. It was like a summer camp for Hitler Youth and also for German American Bund people that want to have the German way. And it pretty much just was like a vehicle for propaganda, the Nazism. People went there, they listened to Wagner music, they listened to Hitler's speeches all day, they paraded around in military formation, they trained for the so-called Tag. Tag is German for day, the day. And that's the day that they're going to have to overthrow the United States and install a fascist government here, just like Hitler. So I like to call Camp Siegfried Hitler's Long Island Legion. And also, you have some people that became summer residents and built homes. And those summer residents turned to be permanent residents. And that's why we got German Gardens, which is there now, which actually had a racial covenants clause saying you had to be of German ancestry to lease the property that the house was on top of. And they only called this lease the property where the house is on top of, this racial covenants clause. They only made a big legal fight about it in 2014. So, this is a legacy that traverses generations.
Right, right. And you're talking about sources, and I think a lot of this is from the Longwood Public Library, but there are amazing photos in the book of the campgrounds and Nazi flags and banners. So this was sort of, they weren't even trying to hide it. Would you say this is like 35, 36 they were
Oh,
operating?
no, they were not trying to hide this at all. Even go 37, 38. They were not trying to hide this at all. And Longwood Library has a very, very extensive collection. I advise everyone to just check it out. You can get lost in it. Melanie over there, very, very amazing librarian. I just want to give her a shout out. She's really dedicated to preserving history. There's a lot of people I find that are like gatekeepers on preservation. She's definitely one of the top gatekeepers I know. She preserves it. She's very willing to share it, and her enthusiasm while you're exploring it is matched by someone writing a book or even more. So I just want to shout out Melanie over there at Longwood Library. Very amazing person. Amazing work she does on keeping this history alive.
What I found a fascinating sort of subplot of the book as you're reading through all the different events and protests and things, and sort of it sounded eerily familiar, but a lot of, like, you talk about LaGuardia, and we'll get into the Madison Square Garden events, but like public officials saying, oh, we have to protect free speech. So, they didn't crack down on the Nazis. So these people operated, like we're saying, out in the light for a long time, and the police would come out against the protesters. I guess what did you see in terms of the debates about free speech back then, freedom of assembly and parade permits and things like that? Were you surprised that these people were able to operate openly, or do you think that's part of the system, and in a way it's maybe evidence of the system working, at least for a while?
Yeah, no, no, no. Well, what I teach at John Jay College is politics of terrorism, and I teach about the militia movement. We like to make jokes and say they're the crazy people that think they're waiting for the Civil War in the backwoods. Well, the German American Bund is one of those militias, essentially. Maybe they got different, ideals than some militia groups, but they really are one of the same. When we talk about the free speech and all this, yeah, it's very complicated. You got these people that talk about sedition. This is before the Smith Act, before testing the constitutionality, essentially, of the Smith Act. So, it's really a gray area, Chris. Like they got guns, they're obtaining these guns from the National Rifle Association. They got membership for the National Rifle Association, so they have their legal advocates right there for the Second Amendment and right to have a militia. And, First Amendment right is free speech. So, they advocated for a fascist overthrow of the United States of America to get rid of free speech and to get rid of our Bill of Rights, while we protected them to say that stuff while they were using our Bill of Rights. So it definitely is a contradiction on their end, of course.
Now, just to maybe try to keep some of these groups straight. So you mentioned the American Bund. So the Bund was not in charge, or who was in charge of Camp Siegfried? Was there
It was the German American Bund.
It was them. Okay.
Yeah. So the German American Bund had a bunch of corporations, which okay. So if you sued one group within the German American Bund, you're not suing the German American Bund. You're suing a separate LLC. So you got the German tourism industry, which sponsors trips back and forth to Germany. That's part of the German American Bund. But say you got hurt there, you tried pressing charges, they could just close that, and the German American Bund's protected. So the German American Bund has like over a dozen limited liability companies that protects it and shields it from liability.
Okay. So it's like an octopus where they can kind of
Yes,
a shell
exactly.
game, shell companies. Yeah.
Exactly. And German Gardens, which is Camp Siegfried,
Mhm.
is the German American Bund. It's just one of those shell companies for real estate.
Gotcha. And that leads, we mentioned Madison Square Garden. So one of, again, the openness, the brazenness of it, it was the Bund that put together this George Washington birthday rally in Madison Square Garden in 30, you can remind me, 34, 30,
No, well, they actually had
39?
a couple. They actually
Okay.
had a couple. This one's in the late 30s. And actually, believe it or not, that's 1939. That's on the eve of World War II. This is February essentially. And when we talk about that, World War II, February 20th. So this is literally on the eve of World War II. And this is going to be the biggest German American Bund rally sponsored by Fritz Kuhn, which is the leader of the German American Bund. There's going to be a couple other smaller ones, but this is going to be the big one.
And what was their goal? This is a very public show of support, or at least their followers. What do you think triggered them to do this big display at that time?
Well, their big display was to essentially unify all the other groups that were affiliated with the Bund and just to display their strength. And it was also a vehicle for membership, essentially. When we talk about the German American Bund rally with Fritz Kuhn in Madison Square Garden on that February 20th, 1939, it's showing that this deplorable group of people is screaming that they're American and the other group is not American, essentially.
Mhm.
Let me explain who's present. Father Colligan's Christian Front, which is another militia group based on Father Colligan, an anti-Semitic person that with that radio show I mentioned. You got the other splinter groups, which is like the 76 group, another paramilitary group that's anti-Semitic. You got all these little fractured groups that have the same ideology as the German American Bund. I think you even have a chapter of the New Jersey Ku Klux Klan there, because at one point the Ku Klux Klan made an alliance with the Bund and they shared the space for rallies. So every horrible racist group in in the tri-state area, maybe in America, is having a pep rally, and it's in Madison Square Garden that February 20th, 1939.
And as we were talking about the kind of friction between the laws and civil rights, people had petitioned LaGuardia to shut it down or to deny the permits, and they had to let it happen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, it's disgusting, and it's really disturbing seeing this stuff. It really is. It really is disgusting and disturbing to see this because, we always have another narrative of history that we're always the good guy. We beat back fascism. We're the ones that went to war to beat it back. But we didn't really realize that we were fighting it right here on our doorstep through people that claiming that they were American while openly advocating the overthrow of America. So, yeah, it's a very complicated and disturbing history.
And just to complete the maybe one of the other main groups, and you can describe or explain better the what lane they were in, but the America First, would you call them a party or a movement, the America First movement?
I'm going to call them a party because they
Okay.
actually had a lot of people that were cross-endorsing them, almost like a political party. At the same time, it is kind of complicated with all those memberships. They didn't really get anyone really successfully on the ballot, really. They just got politicians to endorse them as a political entity.
So would you say they were Bund adjacent, but not necessarily
Oh
collaborating
yeah,
with
they were
them?
definitely. So the American First Rally that was held after World War, like literally after Hitler invaded Poland, they had another rally that was held, and pretty much 50% of all those people at that rally were at the 1939 February 20th rally of the Bund.
Okay.
So yeah, it's their cousin.
A-
Let's put it that way.
And what if people know it, this is why they might know it, but that was the one that Charles Lindbergh spoke at?
Yes, 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 and he also got a flying cross from the Hitler government as well. So he was a sympathetic to the Nazi cause.
Were you surprised? I mean, as a historian, I would probably say I would bet not, but in terms of reading the book, it struck me as and I don't know how close you think we came to, or how close the Bund and these, infiltrators came to actually flipping the story. You mentioned one plot that was involving the New York State militia, which sounded very, very frightening. So, I mean, I guess if you want to elaborate on that plot, but how close do you think they came to tipping politics and public opinion into
Very,
backing?
very close. Very, very close. Yes, we had these plots to overthrow the government. That is true. Christian Front was the biggest one. You also had partnerships with the New York militia as well. But once again, we also had the businessman, the businessman, was it coup prior to that in the mid 30s. All these CEOs were trying to get General Schmidly Butler to overthrow Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And once again, Schmidly Butler essentially is going to go public with this, and it's going to isolate all those CEOs. But then we got this one, and then we got another one. The 30s and the early 40s was very, very turbulent, and I was really surprised how many times, they always say, Chris, we never been this divided. I beg to differ.
Yeah.
Like in the span of like less than 7 years, the country as we know it almost got overthrown probably 7 times. It's just like the changing of the seasons almost at this point.
Right.
So was I surprised? Yeah, I think the big takeaway is no matter how bad it looks right now, we will get through it. We're pretty damn durable. And this book is a tale of that, the durability and the strength of our democracy. Because despite all the craziness, we did get through it and we won. The other thing is the big concern is not just these crazy militia groups, but how Hitler spent $3 million to infiltrate our public media, which is really disturbing. Reader's Digest, one of the main newspapers and periodicals, well, not newspapers, main periodical, sorry about that, had a guy called Lawrence Dennis, who was like their premier writer, and he was writing all these stories about isolationism, how bad Britain is, et cetera, trying to divide our allies. Once again, he was on the payroll. You got George Sylvester Viereck, another person who's on the Hitler payroll, writing speeches for congressmen, and also for senators. And you got the Congressman Hamilton Fish, and I believe the third because there's a bunch of Hamilton Fishes.
And they go way back, right? Very
They do go way
storied
back.
family. Yeah.
And this is a horrible, horrible downfall for that family because they're a political dynasty that's very honorable. But Hamilton Fish, the third, he's going to destroy that by becoming a Nazi sympathizer. But once again, he's going to George Sylvester Viereck's speeches that he's going to write, and that's going to be translated from Hitler's government, is going to be in envelopes that Hamilton Fish is going to mail people within his district. It's going to have his congressional frank on it, which means his congressional mail-in stamp. Hamilton Fish is going to be a very unlikely character in this book because this is a guy that led the fight in 69th, the Harlem Hellfighters. He talked about desegregating military units during World War I. He built the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier with his congressional pork barrel spending, and he also advocated for a homeland for Jewish people in the Balfour Declaration prior to the 30s. And all of a sudden, between 1929 and 1933, he's going to do a 180 and be the opposite of everything I just said, which I don't understand. Like, I don't know how Hamilton Fish went Nazi, especially when he has a long history of this great patriotism for this country, going all the way back to the Continental Congress. You know, his family had a say in everything in New York.
Right. I mean, and there's an interesting the kind of parallel forces that maybe drove some of these people. So like Hamilton Fish was a Republican, and there was a huge hatred of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his policies, and also a huge fear of communism at the same time. So I don't know if all these strands in some people's minds got conflated, and that maybe that to give them some benefit of the doubt, which maybe they don't deserve. But
Yeah, no, I guess, but I know Hamilton Fish, he did say it. Do you regret about the whole Nazi thing? And he's like, no, I'm not. I was never a Nazi. I just detested the Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But that's not an excuse to go Nazi here.
And you don't need hindsight because you knew what the Nazis were doing. They were showing you who they were in Europe with the invasion of Poland and the rampaging and the Nuremberg laws. So it was plain to see if you had the common sense, I guess.
Yeah, no, of course. Even there was also senators. It wasn't just Republican; it was Democrat too.
Mhm.
You had, well, first you got Ernest Ledeen. He's like the biggest senator. He's one of the biggest voices here. He was in Minnesota, I believe. He actually had his speeches written by George Sylvester Viereck directly, which is that's pretty crazy because that guy didn't even write his speeches. He let a Nazi write his speeches.
Yeah, well, and I guess maybe to pivot to some of the or turn the tide a little bit, what I was kind of heartened by, and again, you did all this research to bring these stories together. A lot of cases of espionage, but it seemed a lot of them failed because somebody flipped or they didn't really want to do it. It's amazing of all the attempts and the rings that you name, how few of them actually succeeded or got broken up by either their, someone internally flipping on them or other strokes of luck or fate.
Yeah, so that's another thing. The espionage rings. So the espionage rings, almost all of them are connected to the German American Bund some way, somehow. So that being said, all these spies that are being recruited were Bund members. Sperry's autopilot, bomb sites, that was all leaked, Sperry's in Garden City, by a Bund member that was getting paid by the Nazis to spy. All the boats going in and out of New York Harbor, the shipping lanes, all that. Those were Bund members working around the ports that were taking those timetables and sending them to Nazis. And those Nazis were sending them to the U-boat operators to blow up the boats. And once again, these networks were created through Nazi sympathetic groups and the German American Bund. They weren't really well organized, which we're very fortunate about. The other thing is, one of the biggest blunders they had was Operation Pastorius, which is almost comical. Actually, we should be happy it's comical. Let me take that back. I'm happy it ended this way versus the other way if they wanted to. Essentially, you had all these Nazis land off the coast of Amagansett. And when they landed off the coast they were supposed to find these safe houses of German Bund members. They were going to build these bombs, blow up the Hellgate Bridge, blow up the Penn Station. They were going to blow up the power grid, do all this horrible stuff, these sedition/terrorists. But when they got here, one of them, George Douch, he got a change of heart. And we're kind of happy he did. He called up the FBI to turn himself in. The FBI thought it was a prank call and told him to come down there. He said he couldn't come down there because Bund members and Nazi members were watching the FBI headquarters to make sure he did not turn himself in. So he had to take a train from New York City to D.C. to turn himself in, where he thought the Bund members and Nazi agents will not be. So once again, a lot of it did flop, which is good for us. But the idea that they got this far is pretty scary.
Yeah, and just to give people an awareness of, again, how important Long Island was, you mentioned all the manufacturing plants, but also Einstein was summering in Southold, right? And this was, if anyone's seen Oppenheimer, this is kind of the prequel to, or one of the, inciting incidents of Oppenheimer was on Long Island. Einstein wrote that letter to FDR saying, hey, the Germans are looking to build an atomic bomb.
Yeah, yeah. So we even had a lot of secrets. Yeah, once again, Long Island is overlooked for a lot of this stuff. We got Einstein and the North Fork and was it Nassau Point, Chris? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sure, but I know he sailed a lot, so he
Yeah.
was sailing up there.
Yeah, it was somewhere there, and he's meeting with Salazar, another scientist, and they're discussing the Nazis getting a bomb. And we even have Oppenheimer, who actually stayed in Bayshore as a child on South
Okay.
Saxon Avenue. Yeah. Fun fact, I'm digressing, but I think everyone will kind of like this little fact. His 7-acre estate that his family owned on South Saxon was sold because his little brother had asthma problems and he needed a more drier climate to vacation. And that property they bought with those proceeds was in New Mexico, and it became the Los Alamos site for the Manhattan Project. Yeah, that was actually Oppenheimer's property that he donated to the federal government for that for the Manhattan Project.
No, I did not. That's great. So we came that close to being the birthplace of the atomic bomb, maybe.
Well, I'm kind of happy atomic bomb was invested here.
Yeah. What else would you say about what you uncovered? There's a lot of great, as always, visual material and records from all these archives. Does anything stand out to you as a favorite find, or something that you think is really relevant that hasn't seen the light of day?
The information wars. I think that's the most amazing part. How our secret weapon became truth, and how truth sometimes can be under attack even today. To fit a narrative or to even fit a political agenda. So I think the truth is our secret weapon is definitely one of my favorite parts of the book. And once again, how you beaten back all this Nazi propaganda? Well, you find the rumors and debunk them. And America rolled out a whole information unit, wartime information unit, which debunked Nazi rumors specifically. So I thought that was probably one of my favorite finds.
And just to sort of echo that, what I liked was the role of the press. There's a lot of reporters that went undercover to infiltrate the Bund and Camp Siegfried. So, people had or the press could sway a lot of opinions, or could be that truth teller.
Some of the other heroes that we didn't mention, because we mentioned all the horrible people, Chris.
Yeah, I know. That's right. We should give
Let's
them.
mention some heroes while we're talking about them. The Disabled Veterans of America. They were amazing on bringing down the Bund. They waged lawsuits against the Bund. They had people go undercover to say, hey, they're taking an oath of loyalty. They're not registered with the state, their membership rolls. So they kept nipping at the Bund, legally speaking. So they were probably doing more than the FBI essentially. And it's all these World War I vets, and they were going undercover to do this. They're the ones that actually they were actually communicating with the Dickstein House of Un-American Activities, getting information, recording their every moves in Bresling, which is Lindenhurst. So that became a very, very important back channel, the Disabled Veterans of America, the local chapter we had here on Long Island.
And I think you even mentioned a board member in Yaphank, trying to delay the permits for Camp Siegfried to expand, and they kind of ran him out of office.
Yeah.
But he was trying. He was doing his best.
Yeah, so, despite no matter how crazy things are, you always got people trying to do the right thing. It's not everyone that's hook, line, and sinker going with the 20,000 Nazis parading up and down Yaphank. There were people that had a problem with that. So
yeah, well, it's good to see. I know in your other books you've been able to talk to descendants and family members depending on the story. Was there any chance, or did you think there's anyone still around that could speak to any of this, or families that it would be a hard history to hold on to in your family if you had a Bund member? But did you get to tap in or see any evidence of people alive today that either had material or had written about it or?
Well, to get people alive today, it was kind of tough. There wasn't really many people to talk to, at least openly. I did an article in Newsday about the POW camps on Long Island, and I actually was way more successful. I actually communicated with some people in Germany. I spoke to a POW's descendant well, I didn't really speak to them. I, communicated through email
Mhm.
from Italy. And, some of those Nazi POWs did end up on Long Island and didn't want to land, like one didn't leave, so they actually laid down roots here. They married an American and stayed. I never found anyone that said, yeah, my relative was a Nazi. Woo!
Right. You would hope not, but yeah.
Yeah, everyone had an element of regret here, and they had a story about how they try to atone, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
Yeah.
as a way to kind of land the plane here. So you're an old hand at book promotion and giving talks. So how is this book rollout going for you, would you say?
Yeah, it's going good. It's when I spoke about a couple of times, and these are controversial topics, and I usually expect people to be uncomfortable about this history, but people are having really thoughtful, thought-provoking questions, and it's generating great discussion.
And thanks again to Chris. It's always great to have him on. To recap, his book is out now from History Press. It is Nazis of Long Island, Sedition, Espionage, and the Plot Against America. You'll find links in our show notes to related resources and where you can find the book. That's at longislandhistoryproject.org. That's it for this episode. Our outro music is Capering by the Blue Dot Sessions, used under an Attribution 4.0 international license. And as always, thank you for listening.